AI, it's a multitude of technologies, other factors that are happening, global instability, all sorts of things. But it's really it is a time that feels faster than it's ever been, and it might be the slowest that it's ever going to be as well. So really interesting interesting time. Um, and we were talking about this with the panelists when we're preparing that there's this really interesting kind of thing that happens in your brain. Is this uncertainty, and we're dealing with all this uncertainty, with all this change, or are we moving into instability where things might actually kind of break or fail, as happens in some countries? And I think that's in the back of a lot of people's minds, and that is happening in a number of countries in a number of different ways. But there's always that question of, are we going through uncertainty, or are we headed towards instability? And the brain's trying to like really map all the time what's happening in the future. We're a prediction machine. The brain is a prediction machine, constantly trying to predict this. And I think we're all spending a lot of mental energy on kind of trying to read the tea leaves of change, and what's going on. So interesting. It'd be interesting to hear the panelists' perspectives on this question. Then is a different perspective here. Is it just uncertainty that's going on, or have we hit the kind of threat jackpot? And I would say some people in society in different countries are experiencing the threat jackpot. They're experiencing big so intrinsic attacks on their sense of status and self-worth. Obviously, a big drop of autonomy, of certainty. Feeling less and less in control of the world, feeling like others are controlling them, feeling really disconnected. There's this real sense of disconnection out there and being treated unfairly. And, when you have all five of these, it feels like inescapable stress, or what's called overwhelming stress, or unmanageable stress. And, people are willing to do just about anything to turn this amount of pain down. And I think it's so important we recognize that it's not just uncertainty people are experiencing, but out in the world, many people are experiencing all five of these threats. And, we come to work maybe to get an increased sense of certainty, to increase our sense of autonomy, to have a domain we can feel related with others, right? To feel treated fairly, and to, feel more in control. And I think organizations that ignore those needs are going to be in trouble. We want to get these needs met at work, and some of these needs we're not getting met outside work very much at all. So it's an interesting reflection. And then I guess the question here, and this is a question for the panel, and curious to see what's in the chat as well. The question is, what is the opportunity in uncertainty? So, a difficult time, what do we think the opportunity in uncertainty is? Who'd like to take a stab at that first of all? Maybe Dean, you want to jump in there?
Yeah, there's a lot of ways of looking at uncertainty, and I think of any Game of Thrones folks out there. So yeah, I can't see you raise your hand, but if you watch Game of Thrones, there's a character called Littlefinger, and then he says something in one of the episodes that I rewound several times, and he said, "Chaos is a ladder." And I really thought a lot about that concept, and certainly Littlefinger uses chaos as a ladder for not really great things. But I also thought that that's a truth. There's a lot of things that can happen in chaos, and it can be a ladder to some really extraordinary things. You can see opportunity where others don't see opportunity. In chaos, it shakes things up when it shakes up even control issues, and where you could actually jump in, and it shakes up the market and it creates opportunity. There's a lot of really good things. And I think that, you can look at chaos and all the challenges and uncertainty as a place to hunker down and hold tight, or a place to climb right up and look a little bit higher at the altitude, see what's really going on, and see opportunity. So I think there's obviously there's challenges. There can be distraction in uncertainty and chaos. But I really think there's, as you see, most disruptions at the back end of them, while they're difficult, came a lot of opportunity and a lot of innovation.
Yeah, that's great. It reminds me of a quote: "Never let a good crisis go to waste."
Right.
It's and it really is the mindset. What I hear in that, Dean, is the mindset you bring to it is what matters. Are you seeing this as overwhelming, and are you shutting down? Are you getting sort of shut down going into an away response, right? Or you're leaning into it in a toward response, right? Seeing it as an opportunity, right? Opening your mind up. And it's very much are you having a toward or away response? And it's going to come down to how you appraise or reappraise then the situation. Interesting. Thanks, Dean. Some good reflections. Janet, do you want to jump in there?
Absolutely. When you think about uncertainty versus instability, and specifically in the diversity, equity, inclusion space, I think a good example of uncertainty is all the up and down predictions we've seen in North America. So, we predicted last year that what was going to happen was that things were not going to be as progressive as they seemed in 2020, but they weren't as bad as everybody was saying they were in 2023, because we saw that organizations were still invested in this. And so the truth of the matter is that in 2020, DEI had a bit of a Cinderella moment for reasons we don't like, but it did. By 2023, there was some backlash. And then the SCOTUS decision came through, and the headlines basically said that Cinderella moment was over and the clock was striking midnight. But for many people, that uncertainty was actually a catalyst for growth, because it pushed a lot of organizations and a lot of us in this work to be creative, to find new solutions, new ways to do the work that we had no intention of stopping no matter what. By the same token, for others, that uncertainty actually led to some instability, because what they did was they responded just for that moment, in that moment, without a clear plan for what to do on the other side of the uncertainty. And the organizations that reacted that way in 2020, those are by and large the ones who have backed away from DEI today. So uncertainty doesn't have to mean instability, but without a plan, it sometimes does. With a plan, it can create a lot of creativity and opportunity.
That's great. I think that's what kind of having a towards state looks like in this uncertainty is like leaning in, having a plan, reappraise and then have a plan, right? Reappraise to opportunity and then have a plan. That's great. Thanks so much, Janet. Rachel, your reflections. What do you think what is the opportunity in uncertainty?
Yeah, I think that there's so much opportunity and uncertainty. Like, I mean, we can tell people there's new skills. You can free yourself of whatever sacred cows existed, ask yourself today what matters most. But as I considered this question, I was reflecting on the last 2 years, 5 years, 10 years of us doing this work, this deep strategy work, culture change work. And what I've seen emerge in the last 2 years, especially, is in organizations, so many organizations across industries, there is this broken dynamic between senior leadership and people managers and their employees, where I see senior leaders navigating change by themselves, navigating uncertainty by themselves, thinking, I cannot share this. How can I share this without creating chaos, without creating instability? And at the same time, employees saying, my trust, the transparency I feel, the accountability I feel from senior leadership is waning. I want more information. And there is this negative feedback cycle, or this negative loop that we're in. And so for me, there's so much that we could talk about, but fixing that dynamic, teaching people, teaching leaders how to talk about uncertainty, how to provide clarity rather than that instability, is the major opportunity.
Beautifully said. Thanks, Rachel. Lots of comments in the chat there as well on that. Anna Tavis, let us in on your reflections on this.
Just really quickly to summarize, I think what's really important about uncertainty is that the baseline is shifting. The baseline of certainty as stability, predictability, etc., is no longer there. And uncertainty as a baseline really could be a catalyst for innovation and growth. And is it toward state? I like that kind of generalized term. But I think that shift in the mindset, assuming that uncertainty is the baseline rather than certainty is. And I would even stay away from plans, because we don't know, planning is a kind of longer term predictability, but more around agility, adaptability, and resilience. So we have, for organizations, we have to come up with a new vocabulary of what it means, and that will help shape kind of collective mindset around what's the baseline and where we need to be if we were to be an innovative organization.
Yeah, Yeah, thanks. No, it's a good call out. So we want to create a towards state, reappraise to the opportunity, and then maybe have strategies, have broad strategies for leaning in, that we can really address and keep being nimble and adaptive and evolving into really critical ways. It's being super prepared. I go back to the session with Rita McGrath early on about gathering information from the edges. We had the opening keynote yesterday. Sort of really listening very closely, very quickly to the edges of the organization, so you can adapt and evolve very quickly to what's going on. Fantastic. Well, some great comments there, and I think that some common themes. Let's dig in a little further. I want to share some provocations that we've been thinking about for 2024, and get some of your comments and reflections. And this is such an interesting one. This is from Mercer recently, that ineffective leadership has been ranked as the most severe HR risk of 2024. So Rachel, you're right on there. But ineffective leadership, the biggest HR risk. It's not anything else, and it's kind of surprising and kind of not surprising as well. But this is a study, from this year. A lot of implications to that. I go back to what we shared in the opening keynote, that 71% from Korn Ferry's research, 71% of CEOs have imposter syndrome, from a recent study. 71% imposter syndrome. And why would that be? Well, they're doing things they've never been trained for, that they really don't have any idea about how to do. And someone posited in the opening keynote as well, maybe the approach to leadership now has to be more feminine. A lot of the leaders are more masculine in their gender, and it just kind of feels like a whole different way they have to lead now, with more empathy, more understanding, more involving stakeholders. But interesting, ineffective leadership is a big issue, and even 71% of CEOs anyway don't feel like they know what they're doing quite regularly. So it's a really fascinating number. What does this all mean? We think that leadership development needs disruption, and what we're talking about here is disrupting, and not just how CEOs are mentored or how the C-suite are developed, but really how anyone who manages people is given better skills. There's such an enormous gap between the skills they should have and the skills they have at every level of manager. And I spoke earlier about this and some of the challenges, but actually, let me just go back. We spoke about this yesterday a couple of times, that more than half of what leaders have to do are literally completely new skills, like how to manage hybrid practices, how to manage the rollout of AI in a meaningful way, how to manage the polarization that's happening, how to manage through overwhelm. These kinds of things, they're really new skills that people need to be, really thinking about unpacking. But the other half, so that's about 50%, the other half are harder and more important. So in other words, and these are things like just understanding people, motivating them, developing them. But it's much harder to understand someone if you don't see them and they're overwhelmed. And it's much more important that you motivate them, but harder. And it's much more important and harder that you develop them, right? So, understanding, motivating, developing people, given kind of the new world, both harder and more important, and then all these new skills. So we can't just keep kind of imagining we'll have the quality of leaders that we need by doing things the way we always have. So there's definitely some changes that need to come. This is something we started talking about this summit. It's been kind of emerging out of the background. We've been sort of sense making and sort of feeling this coming for the last maybe 12 months or so. We just started to do a half-day mini summit called Leadership Now that kind of digs into this, and incredible feedback on that. But growth mindset, psych safety, and accountability, these seem to be the three most important skills in this era. And growth mindset, so that you're just open to adapting fast. And the stronger your growth mindset, the faster and easier you're going to adapt. The more resilient you'll be, the more creative you'll be, the more adaptive you'll be, the more you'll stay in that towards state. Psych safety, which is in some ways you can think of it as much further along than just inclusion. It's creating the conditions for the best ideas to come forward from everyone. and facilitating that. So it's a really important skill. And then interestingly, accountability. And this summit, we launched a new framework for accountability that we've been working on for some time. We're really excited about the science in that and how it can make even very, very rational, kind of process-focused people actually understand what it takes to make sure things happen. We finally unpacked what we think are the real core cognitive skills that people who are really good at getting stuff done have, and then how to teach those to others. So growth mindset, psych safety, accountability, kind of three themes that we think are really critical in leadership going forward. We've woven these into our lead solution. We have these as individual solutions. We're doing lots and lots of work around these, but just interesting to see kind of this theme coming out of the background. And we're just publishing a paper on each one. Some of these have been in the works for years. The growth mindset one's been kind of being worked on for years. Accountability we did relatively quickly in the last year, and psych safety we've been working on for a few years again. But we managed to kind of pull all three together. The psych safety is coming up in December, but the other two out now. So we're calling this the leadership GPA, growth mindset, psych safety, accountability. Interesting concept. And we're going to be leaning more into this. So I guess let's go to the panel, maybe this time starting with Anna. What are your thoughts about disrupting leadership development, the importance of it, how it needs to happen? Let's hear from you and also from folks in the chat. What are your thoughts about disrupting leadership development? Over to you, Anna.
Yes, just to build on the ideas from the past panel, I think where we're at, we need to develop dynamic models of leadership development and emphasize dynamism, as well as something that continues to come up in surveys about the importance of purpose. And I would emphasize purpose-driven leadership development, purpose-driven thriving in organizations. But we can definitely break down the skills into the incremental empathy, et cetera, et cetera. However, I think creating the ecosystem of dynamic leadership opportunities within the changing context of reality in which every leader operates with a lot of uncertainty. I would say leadership within developing leaders within the ecosystem of dynamic organization is where we need to be. And how we design it, specific forms of design of those programs, we can certainly debate. But right now, I think putting leadership in, putting purpose back in the leadership as the front guiding principle, and then aligning whatever learning design tricks we're going to bring in is going to be guiding that new evolution of leadership development.
Great. Yeah, thanks so much. Let's go to Rachel. What are your reflections?
Yeah, something so important that you mentioned, David, as you were talking about that feeling of taking on new skills, learning new things, being in places, and managing situations that you've never done before. We know from a brain-based perspective from the research that feeling leads to the use and dependency of our cognitive biases, whether it be like keeping close to the things that we think are safe, staying close to the people that we feel are similar to us. And there's so much about how we perceive change, what we perceive to be true. I saw the keynote with Rita and how she posited, about like feminine skills and masculine skills. I think I disagree a little bit. I think like what's really at play there is you have people that might be perceiving these skills to be new. They might be perceiving these skills to be different than their personality. And what I love so much about what we're trying to do with, your leadership GPA is that each one of those domains actually helps you cool down your brain, helps you bring yourself back from that threat state. And so you're not only as I see growth mindset and psych safety, I think of a graph, like we're encouraging people to grow and we're giving them the safety net. And then accountability is, when you fall, you're helping them get back up. So, so much about this is like managing your own threat state and giving people the ability to calm down just a bit, to manage that uncertainty.
Right. Yeah. Interesting. Thanks, Rachel. You just reminded me of something. You know, we did some study some years ago into leadership models, and we didn't have a session on that this year, but we've got a lot of research on that comes out of studying the patterns in leadership models. And one thing is we found these like 4 or 5 types of leadership models, like the acronym model, the who model, the what model, and the how model, which is sort of really interesting. But we also looked at like what happens when you essentially ask hundreds of companies what matters most for leaders now. And what we found inevitably was that there's always something, if you simplify it to 3 things, there's always something in one of 3 categories. There's always something about the future. So if you're sort of saying what do leaders need to be most reminded of most often, you end up with something about the future, about sort of imagining the future or considering the future, thinking about it, inventing, building it, strategizing, all this, which is very much growth mindset, right? Thinking about and innovating that way. You end up with something about people, and in this case, the focus is psychological safety, and you have something about like sort of about results and really delivering. And here we have accountability. So growth mindset, psych safety, accountability are kind of the 3 most important things that all leaders or most leaders need to be focusing on most often. And it's really correlating with our research. So I think that's something jumping out for me. Janet, what are your reflections there?
Well, those are the 3 big ones that you definitely have to do if you're thinking about reimagining how we prepare leaders to lead in an ever-changing and an ever more diverse world. I mean, you think about those 3 things: growth mindset, psych safety, accountability. One of the biggest reasons that, for example, diversity, equity, and inclusion initiatives don't get off the ground is because of the lack of accountability. We put these things in place and nobody has accountability for it. So we are past the point now where we have to raise awareness. And one of the speakers, I think it was in the case study session, mentioned that one of the reasons she had followed NLI over the years through many different organizations was because she was sick of seeing learning and development things that were just about raising awareness. She goes, we've done that. So what she wanted and what she was looking for was the ability to give leaders language and practical guidance to actually do something with this awareness they have. So that means in diversity, equity, and inclusion, new kinds of programs that actually challenge assumptions, that can foster empathy, that can build the skills that are needed to lead in a way that actually embraces the diversity that we're going to be dealing with no matter what. So we have to empower them to do the 3 things, that we kind of see, which is interrupt bias, integrate inclusion, and improve systems within their own organizations. And the accountability of that is not just for their own journey, but understanding that they have to enable these journeys for an entire organization. They have to be equipped to build an environment where everybody is able to do and involve themselves in this process.
That's great. Janet, could you throw those 3 things in the chat? I know those 3 things that we came to as the critical priorities for people focusing, particularly on DEI.
I'll do that.
And the 3 I's are really, really helpful kind of set of focuses for what to do now in the environment we're in with DEI. Thanks so much, Janet. Dean, from your perspective, what are your reflections on disrupting leadership development?
It's no surprise to me that 71% of CEOs have imposter syndrome. I think about the process to become CEO is you're either selected, and you may go through some, intense selection process, and someone brings you in from someone else where you're wildly successful at some other place. And because you were wildly successful there, then that means you're going to be successful here and you're put in the role, or someone's promoted into it. I just think about all the ways that people get into the job, and it is a running freight train. There's not a lot of room to go, okay, well, this is going to be a training in the job moment. You're going to learn by doing. And for the next year, we're going to do this and help you get there. On day 1, there's an expectation that the person has to be crushing it. And by the way, there's likely some massive crisis. There's like something that happens in the world that has something in the company that they need to deal with. This isn't just like, okay, well, I jump in while the trains are running fine. It's a really difficult job. Yeah. So my thought is, how do you set up, and someone mentioned this, the systemic things to help a CEO become successful? And of course, they have imposter syndrome. One and then just some pragmatic and practical applications of that and things that we don't typically do. You give them a coach, but you give them a coach that they meet somewhere else. Then what I find is practical is put the coach in the room with the leadership team, have them watch every single town hall and coach them while they're working. Someone they trust, someone they can talk with them and tell them truth. You learn by having not just, self-awareness, but self-accountability. And you talked about this concept of accountability. If there's not someone holding you accountable for you, then you don't make change and you can't see it. And everyone else in the room is going, yes, you're doing awesome. And no, they're not. So I think that's some of the challenges is because CEOs have so much power, you get a lot of yes people around you. And really they're whispering like, they have no idea what they're doing. And a coach in the room is an example of just help. I think there's systemic things we need to do around two things you got to select for, things you got to build for. And I think the way we build CEOs to get ready for them are very lacking in like the structured way you get to be CEO. And I don't think we have programmatic ways of making them prepared for the job.
Freight train. It's like a freight train coming at you. I get that. Thanks so much, Dean. You remind me a couple of the insights during the sessions. We had Catherine Vandermeer, who's the CHRO of Telstra. The Australians in the room are going, oh, Telstra. Everyone else is going, who's Telstra? They're the biggest telecom in Australia, about 45,000 people. They run the phone systems and the internet platform across the country. And, very, very big company, one of the most public and important companies in Australia. So we partnered with her when she just started to roll out a completely new set of leadership principles. She had some really interesting comments in the closing keynote yesterday about this topic of really transforming the development of leaders. It was a fantastic session. If you didn't make it, watch the recording. But she one of the things that really jumped out is in a sort of classic casual Australian style. She said, yeah, no, we have a contrarian in every important meeting, just sitting there and arguing with everyone. And everyone's like, wait, what? How do you get that? How do you make that happen? And what's that like? She's like, oh, no, it's great. And we rotate who does it. They have some basic frameworks, and basically they, help reduce bias by in all the important meetings by kind of challenging assumptions and making sure people are, doing the right things. And interestingly, they're actually, based on their framework. So we help them build a 3-part framework. And, it's based on that framework. And then people are getting tons and tons of feedback on the framework and all this. And I think, that work of kind of simplifying to 3 critical expectations, and then you're getting really serious about it, is not a silver bullet, doesn't fix everything, but seems to be, very, very helpful as part of the process. And we're continuing to double down on that. Let's continue. I want to share probably the biggest provocation. This is one I'm kind of excited about. A culture change, the field of culture change needs some accountability. Right now, you can go to lots of different firms. You can spend anywhere from $50 million to $5,000 and get similar things. You can put people into incredibly long, cumbersome workshops and achieve no real change, and no one really notice. So imagine if we could bring some accountability to culture change and make it much more of a science. And one of our favorite sayings: follow the science, experiment, follow the data. Well, we've been collecting data for a long time now. It's close to 10 years we've been collecting data about how people change during our different programs, anchored on habits. So we've been looking at what are the habits people should have, how many people actually build that habit, what happens maybe 6 months later. And guess what? We've got so much data. We've been able to compare industries and formats and all sorts of really cool things. And so we're starting to see that there's a way to bring some real accountability to culture change work. And I want to share with you just sort of some of the cliff notes that we're very excited about, including one really interesting number. But imagine bringing metrics that would help you measure the change at scale that you're trying to drive, and even justify investments and justify tweaks to your investments, and really think in a meaningful way about this. So this is something really fascinating. The percentage here is what we call our BCP, or behavior change percentage. What this means is that on average, in all the work that we've done across oil, gas, energy, utilities, includes like consulting, different kind of engineering firms, consulting engineering firms, that kind of thing. But 87% of all the people who have come in from those organizations and work with us have built one of their habits, at least one of the habits, and it's now a habit, 87%. Now that sort of makes sense. That's a high number. That makes sense. Those people are used to protocols. They're used to following, structures because they're in high danger environments. Right. So these are, people who put lines in the ground and, wires in the air, and they're used to like doing things kind of that they're told. You compare that to engineers in IT at the bottom who are very sort of autonomous and independent, much less likely to follow instructions. But so there's this kind of follows how you would imagine these industries being involved. But what's really interesting about this is we've got kind of a baseline. We've got kind of a benchmark now of pretty much any industry you're in. We're confident we can get 80%, and you should be able to get 80% of your audience doing things differently. On average, in some different solutions higher, some lower, but on average about 80%. That's an amazing number. And if you're doing change work, I really challenge you in your organization to work out the habits that you want people to have and actually measure 30 days after you've done some kind of initiative. How many people have that habit now? It's not that hard to find out. And compare compare those results across different learning styles, across different kind of articulations of the programs. But if you're not getting, 80%, there's something that's not right, because it's very, very possible to do this. So we're really excited to see this data, and a big congrats to the research team and, everyone involved internally on, really tens of thousands of data points in here, maybe actually hundreds of thousands of data points to get this number. So really, really interesting perspective. Here's another one. This is hot off the press. So, can help you like justify different things. So what we see is that when we just come in and do, say, grow, which is, growth mindset, over a month in any format, on average, this is from 10,000 data points, 82% of people are going to be doing something differently now they weren't doing before. And it'll be something that only drops a couple of percent 6 months later, particularly with the grow work. So something standard, 82%. Now let's tailor it a bit more, 2% more. Now let's make it custom. So now it's 7% more. That's kind of meaningful, right? But now you can look at this and say, well, what's the cost of standard versus custom? And, we're going to get 7% more people really across the board. Is that worth it? Isn't it worth it? This kind of thing. So we're excited about strange things, I know, but we're really excited about this data and being able to actually see, the impact of different kinds of decisions. And then here's this crazy idea. I've had this crazy idea, and my team's just been sort of rolling their eyes at it. It's one of these things that happens every year. I have a crazy idea. But the third time I finally kind of badgered people and said, look, we've really got to work out this idea. We finally did it. It was complicated and kind of hard to work out, but we did it. And I've really always wondered, like, is there a cost per habit that we could work out? And how does that compare to different kinds of learning solutions? Because if we know the percentage of people that have a habit, right, in an audience, right, we've got some math to work off, right? This now just becomes algebra. We know the percentage of people who have a habit. We know the costs of different programs. We know the percentage that have habits from other kinds of programs. And so we could put this together. So it was a lot of work. We did it. The team was actually very excited about it once we got going. And I'll tell you what we got to. It's a crazy number. Standard in-person designs. So if your company says, look, let's do some in-person workshops, it's going to cost you about $2,000 per habit. Now, of course, that's going to vary depending on how you design it, what you do. But on average, remember, this isn't participation. This is not 2,000 per person. This is 2,000 per habit. So you've got 10,000 people. You want them to really be much more open-minded. It might be $2,000 per habit to get those people across the board. Do this with a brain-based design. So do this following our research and applying some of the good thinking. It's about 14 times cheaper. So it's about a 14-to-1 relationship. So we're able to say, look, even though intuitively it might feel better to do something just in person, one-off, do something in a brain-based way, and you're going to have a massive cost reduction, not to mention the ability to scale and really impact people. And there's really a stark difference between these two kinds of approaches. So we're super psyched about that, and this can start to bring some real accountability to decision making in the space. Rachel, do you want to weigh in there? I know you've been central to some of this. I bet you have some comments.
Yeah, one of the things that comes up for me is just, as we think about thriving through uncertainty and all of the change that we're experiencing, the margin for error is so slim. It's razor thin. And every day we talk to organizations that are like, we have to get this right. Let's look at this strategy. Let's make this strategy. Let's identify the behaviors. And there's no room for error. And so when we don't see people focus on actual behavior change, I'll quote one of our brilliant researchers, Dr. Bridget Lynn, in the chat. She said, knowing what a desired behavior is very different than engaging in that behavior. And when your margin for error is zero, and so much is at stake, how can you not really get serious and maybe a little obsessed? We're obsessed with habits and behavior change, but how can you not be when it's so important and the stakes are so high?
Yeah, no, fantastic. People just invest enormous amounts in, measuring their marketing, right? They spend so much money on measuring the accountability of their marketing these days, but like nothing on like the accountability in these change initiatives. A couple more data points, then we'll hear from some others. But just look at this. This is 30 days. And a data point I didn't bring up here, but now I wish I had. Our distributed learning solution, which is was short for DLS in the bottom there, our distributed learning solution is actually now more effective than what we call our hives, which is basically 3 Zoom sessions. So something that's largely asynchronous, except for 1 hour, and spread over a month, and very low cost, is more effective than 3 synchronous 1 hour sessions. So it just by 1%, it literally just beat it by 1% finally. And so what you're seeing here, this is sort of what's possible in just 1 month. 87% of nearly 5,000 people shifting to a growth mindset, right? 77% of 18,500 people doing something with bias. 84% of 4,000 people doing something with inclusion weekly. So it's possible, a brain-based way to do things really, really differently, get a, really quite amazing result. Follow the science, experiment, follow the data. That's the mantra overall. So let me pause there. I'm going to have to go back to my favorite data point just there. Love to hear from some others. Dean, Anna, Janet, who'd like to weigh in. Any reflections on bringing some accountability to culture change and learning and leadership development?
I'll jump in. One of the challenges, when we talk about, what's happening in the workplace, is we all know that we've got a lot of polarization, and we did a whole session on civility versus incivility. Those are all behaviors, and a lot of what the work that has been done up to now has been about changing people's beliefs in diversity, equity, and inclusion. We want you to believe something different. I think it's time to think about the fact that it's the behavior we want to change. And, the belief may follow eventually, but at the end of the day, it's the behavior that's the problem. So when we think about what it costs, per habit to change behavior, I think it's very important to think about focusing on doing the things that can really be effective. Because one of the issues that has made diversity, equity, and inclusion a hard thing to keep in organizations is, well, we don't know about the cost. There's all this cost to it. And when things get tight, that's the first thing to go. But if it were actually doing things to change people's behavior, to make a more civil workplace, to eventually get to the point where it's not just civil, but respectful, perhaps, I think that you could then justify the cost of keeping these things there. And if you look at the fact that now we can prove that there's a cost per habit, and we can show that, I think when you talk about disrupting training and leadership, that's a very important thing to look at.
Yeah, fantastic. And disrupting the biases people have of, we've got to get everyone in a classroom because everyone wants to be in a classroom. Maybe it's a time for hybrid learning where, yeah, great, bring people to a classroom for like 90 minutes, right? Build a relationship, get them going, but then, do the real work in a real brain-based way. And that's an important insight. Dean, you want to jump in there? What are your reflections on bringing some accountability to change leadership and learning experiences?
There's my rolling moment is typically when I hear a leader say, we need a big change in management, we need a culture change right now. And I usually, my impulse is always to hold up a mirror, but that's a like culture change starts right in front of me. I'm just like, so the habits that you have and the habits you support are the way the culture is going to go. And to say culture change and point it that way, I'm like, culture change starts here. That's my first thing. But I hear it so much, and I this, oh my God, we're about to waste a whole bunch of time and energy and money on this culture change initiative, and we're going to be nowhere. We're going to lose our focus on the business. We're going to focus on this thing, and it's not going to happen. And so yes, holding leaders and accountable for culture change initiatives in terms of what is the problem we're really trying to solve? Is it something that you feel good about because you told the board we had a culture change initiative?
Yeah.
Or is it really trying to solve a real problem? And going back, I think what's helpful is this, going to the specific habits that need to be changed. And as you mentioned in other conversations, habits are changed one habit at a time. Like I have, 15 leadership principles. We're going to teach those all in a day and all come together and change all 15 of these. And that doesn't work. And the thing is, it is the definition of crazy to keep doing the same thing over and over again because we know it doesn't work. And so the opportunity to change one habit at a time, by repeating it and being really clear about that, I've seen that change when you focus on one thing at a time over a small period of time over and over again. Then you see habit change and you see culture change. Other than that, it's just a big, gigantic waste of money.
Yeah, it's a big
Sorry, that's
shindig. It's a big shindig.
my hard take.
Thanks very much. Anna, some comments there for you.
Just really quickly, I want to build on my idea of doing everything within the system, within the ecosystem, because the unit of measure for leadership has always been that particular senior executive that received executive coaching, was sent to, various programs, et cetera. And I think doing it, to Dean's point, kind of in the flow of work, in the flow of discovery-based, science-based learning for leaders when they encounter issues, et cetera. And the second point I want to make, and really applaud what NLI is doing, is data. There's nothing more, there's nothing more compelling that will drive accountability if there is a feedback that's through data, through the organization, that is delivered to the leader about how are they doing, what are the milestones, et cetera, et cetera. These are all very important, trappings of a good and new and refreshed system science feedback within the flow of work in systemic approach.
Yeah, no, thanks very much. And I think there's a big trend coming. We talked about this yesterday around, learning in the flow of work. Writers, people need things. That's a big trend coming, and we're moving into that. I still think there's a role for some kind of just in case learning, but done very, very efficiently and done in a way that is, doesn't distract, doesn't, take away. And, it's amazing. You can take a 6-hour classroom in a day, and you can have radically more impact spreading it over 1 year, 6 1-hour sessions in 1 year, or even 3 1-hour sessions 1 year. 3 distributed learning solutions ends up being about 6 hours of learning. So 3 DLSs with your team, radically more impact than 6 hours at a classroom. And you might be able to impact the entire organization with that for a similar cost with, than a cohort. So some really, really exciting opportunities to, in the space. All right, let's go to some reflections from each of you. I got a bunch of ideas, but I'd love to hear from each of you. I know you've been at a lot of the sessions, and then we'll hand back to Erin for the close. We might be slightly ahead of time. We'll see how we're going. But I'd love to hear from each of you the most meaningful insights from the summit this year. And you've got time for a couple of each. What's really struck you from the opening keynote on where leadership is now through, all of day one, right through to, this afternoon sessions and now? What's been some of the most meaningful insights for you? Who'd like to jump in there first?
I'm always ready to jump in first.
Go for it, Janet.
The session that I sat in on, that I actually led, was on accountability, sustainability, and adaptability. And, when I did that session, it was really focused on diversity, equity, and inclusion, but it truly has been a theme that I've seen throughout this whole conference. And it is because those are the 3 things that no matter what are going to get us through change that we know is going to come. So in one of the sessions, Carlene Gordon, I believe said that her thing about leadership was that it's not just about people being led through a door. Once you get into an organization, once you start doing things, you really have to build a way for learning and development, for change, for all those things, to work for everybody there. And it's not just for individuals. We can't just, put training programs in place and expect people to become leaders. Leaders themselves have to engage. We have to provide all the resources, we have to provide everything they need, and we have to create a psychologically safe environment. Because otherwise, all the training you do, all the development you do doesn't matter. And it's especially crucial for leaders that they got to be equipped to guide and support others on this journey. So when I think about accountability, which was the one that just kept coming up for me, accountability to me is leaders are accountable, but there has to be a way to infuse that throughout an entire organization. Because you think about what happens if everybody chooses some level of accountability, if the whole organization's accountable for something, for a shared goal. We talk about, shared goals. If everybody is accountable, that's how you move organizations forward. That's how you change behavior. That's how you deal with continual change. People have a shared goal. They're all accountable for it, and they're accountable for it in their own unique ways of work, whatever it is they're doing in their space. And that requires thinking about organizations not just as a collection of individuals, but as a great big organization where the individuals are all working together. And so accountability is individual, but it is also organizational.
Yeah, thanks, Janet. Accountability is definitely one of my big ones, but we'll dig into that. Thanks so much for your sharing and input and great work this summit. Who'd like to go next? Rachel, do you want to jump in there? Some of your biggest insights across the summit, across Evolve 2024.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'll start maybe some piecemeal ones, and then I'll give you more holistic ones. One of my favorite insights so far came from the civility session, where I learned that civility is contagious, not incivility necessarily, but civility can be contagious. And that idea of good behavior, especially when modeled by leaders, by managers, what we can do and how we can help our people, it really struck a chord with me, especially as we think about times where we don't know what up is or where down is or how we're going to really kind of embodying, Dean, what you were saying, be the change you want to see in the world. And so that kindness, that decency, doing the right thing can be contagious for others. And I think that's an important thing to anchor on. The other insight that I had was just as we were thinking and as we're talking about, punitive accountability versus proactive accountability, insights around what the differences between those two and look like in an organization, where you may not know you have an accountability problem, but if you have a decisions, death by consensus organization, you have an accountability problem. You have a micromanagement problem in your organization, you have an accountability problem. And so how we notice what is happening in our environment, how we regulate ourselves, I think is going to be so important in 2025 and beyond. Giving leaders and employees the skills to manage their threat levels, that growth mindset, the psych safety, and how we communicate with one another, how we see each other act, how we set those behaviors and that standard, I think is what's going to help us navigate, today it's target A, tomorrow it's target B. So really relying on each other.
Great. Thanks so much, Rachel. Some thoughtful comments. Dean, you want to go next there?
Yeah, and I'm going to talk about this just context of coming to these summits for a very, very long time. And I love the enduring nature of growth mindset. It's the very first first event that I went to. We leaned heavily into growth mindset. Carol Dweck was there. I read 3 books on growth mindset, and I brought it to my team, and I think that endures. And I think that's important to talk a little bit about, to see that growth mindset, 10 years later is still here, still relevant, still data relevant, and still having an impact. And it's one of the parts of the GPS I think is awesome.
Yeah.
The other thing is, 3 years ago, psychological safety came up. And there was a lot of conversations about, the issues that, that Janet talked about, were causing kind of the big DEI moment and tons of psychological unsafety. So it was a need to talk about that. But guess what? It's still relevant because it was data. It wasn't like a moment of the time. And so what I really like about the final thing that we're really leaning into in this whole piece is a lot about accountability. And I think about, we talk a lot about leadership having self-awareness. And it really hit me in this, that it's not about self-awareness, it's about self-accountability. And how can you you can certainly be aware or not aware, but every single day you have to be accountable, not to make sure that a coach is helping you better or that other people in the team are made together, or you get a 360-degree feedback. You have to be accountable to yourself every single day to get better at being a leader, to go to things like this. And anyhow, this concept of, self accountability, I think is so important, not counting on anyone else to fix your issues or, oh, it's my team. I got to change my team to make this better. Being really self accountable. And I found leaders that are wildly self accountable versus any self-aware and self-accountable are the ones that I love working for and love to work for again. So I don't know, I just want to lead in that concept, one of just the enduring nature of things we've been talking about 10 years, 5 years, and now, and how they all come together into this real, concept at the end of the day. The only person who's most accountable for how I treat people every single day is me. And I should be accountable to get better at that every single day and be curious. Beautiful. I think we have a lack of curiosity is my biggest concern.
Yeah, beautiful. Thanks so much. You remind me, we had an opening session for Europe, Middle East, Africa, that some of you may have seen. It was early, but we had an opening session that we did as kind of past, present, and future of neuro leadership. And one of the three themes was just how enduring growth mindset, in particular, and psych safety, have been. And we looked at just how enduring and impactful things like the SCARF model and SEEDS model have been, and just the incredible impact those have had. So a really interesting session. If you want to catch up on sessions, and you're new to NLI in particular, I think that session, called Neuro Leadership Past, Present, Future, is a really interesting kind of starting point to see the landscape. Thanks, Dean. Anna, any reflections there?
Yes, absolutely. Actually, I want to build on what Dean was saying with the same reflection that I've been coming to these NLI meetings from the very beginning, and remember Carol Dweck as well. And but I do think that there is a nuance, and there is a next chapter in how all of these fundamentals are playing out today. And I want to connect this to the opening session with Rita McGrath and Michael Ficcaro and you, David, discussing, this kind of new situation, new challenges, and how do you look around the corners? How do you, create resilience 2.0, et cetera. And I think that capturing what's new, along with celebrating how, fundamental those discoveries are, is really, really important. And to me, it is, I think what we're beginning to see, again, with the new tools, with AI and other types of measurements that are beginning to be available to us, we can actually blow it up from, again, the unit of measure being just one individual, and where we're focused in on one brain, one set of habits, one set of expectations and accountabilities. And David, you mentioned that, to how does it play out in the system? How does the ecosystem maintains itself through the diversity, to Janet, your point, through the diversity of inputs? And I think we have those tools now, and I would like to see an ally going forward to be able to really elevate the what we know, the insights from individual playing out in these context of the system, organization, and society at large.
Yeah, no, thanks, Anna. It's definitely a fascinating time to be leading this organization and involved in, this research. And I think, we're having more and more access to data, and as we start to roll out our own AI initiatives as well, there's some incredible opportunities there. So yeah, I wanted to share some of the reflections I had as well. In no particular order, one of them, I think, speaking of accountability, the session with Moran Cerf and two Kaths, we had Kath van der Merwe and Kath Kamian as well, and myself. We had a session on disrupting leadership yesterday. Just the amazing research that Moran's doing around synchronization. And the cliff note, if you went there, the cliff note is you can actually get real feedback about how well you connect with another person, and they actually are kind of seeing what you're seeing. you can get real data about that. And we're actually building what we're calling a C-suite brain lab. It'll happen early May in New York City. My team can put a link in the chat if you want to sort of check that out. But the 4 days of basically real-time feedback about how well you're actually able to like tell stories, influence people, give feedback, motivate people, just get people thinking about things, like real-time feedback with all these different exercises, activities, and learning about your brain. So we're really psyched about that. But it just really hit me yesterday about just how much accountability that can bring and how many kind of poor leadership skills this can uncover and help people with. And what Moran was saying is just getting the data without even getting any coaching or anything was really helping people. Just seeing real data about how well or poorly they actually really do connect with others. Fascinating. And I think that's, it's new technology. It's a new way to think about accountability in leadership. And, maybe we'll be training leaders and CEOs in years to come in this approach. Dean, come along, bring us some people. Let's have some fun in May 2025. So that was one thing. This morning really had an impact on me, the insight session, Insight Creativity AI. And if you haven't seen it, really get in and watch that one. Just such an amazing session. And I think the big takeaway from me, aside from how lucky we are to be connected to these amazing researchers, the big insight for me was like, don't rob people of the insight moment. Is that we don't want AI to like rob people of the opportunity of making those connections. The insight moments really energize. AI can speed up how quickly you come to those insights, make them deeper, broader, and help you execute them better. Maybe even help you make sure that they're correct, as Jonathan Schooler reminded us of. So such an opportunity with AI, and to think of it as a complex system that helps us learn faster and increase our zone of proximal development. And so such an interesting set of insights about integrating AI into our learning solutions, into our day-to-day world. So that was a really big one. The cost per habit, you saw my enthusiasm for that. I'm just blown away by the 14-to-1 difference, but just so excited to have that kind of data now and all the data that we now have. We shared a session. We shared a lot more in the measurement session earlier today. Recommend you watch that if you missed that. And then finally, just there's a real theme around, or almost finally, a real theme around accountability keeps coming up, and we're just very excited that about the quality of the science that helps people actually understand the mechanisms to making sure things happen. And really, like step by step, people can actually see where they need to work on, and really understand the science of what it takes to make sure things really happen. We're super psyched. And then finally, just from the opening session, and it's really been a theme all through. And Stephanie Mehta from Fast Company shared this in the opening, that critical thinking is certainly last year was the #1 skill that leaders need, critical thinking, and that's interesting. Now, the other 9 of the top 10 are actually human skills in some ways, which is amazing. But critical thinking, #1. Now, to think critically, you actually need to understand humans really well. You need to really understand, what drives people, just how humans think, what our capacity limits are, what motivates people, what our biases are. So it's interesting that as we become more and more focused on technology, for the humans in our organizations, we need to understand people more and more. Critical thinking is thinking about people and processes. And to do that, we need to actually understand, the human brain even more. So we're excited about the opportunity of this time, and it's a privilege to be able to do this work. So, any closing comments before we hand back to Erin? We've got a couple minutes early. Any closing comments for any of you about thriving through uncertainty? Anything else you'd like to add, Anna?
Yeah, I think this has been an amazing, mind-opening session. Not just this session, but the entire conference. I think the variety of speakers and the inputs, and to your point, David, going back and reviewing some of that because there was so much information. I think it will feed us for the entirety of the year, and then we can come back and reassess and hold ourselves accountable for actually implementing what we promise.
Absolutely. Thanks, Anna. And I know we've got a closing with Erin, in a moment, stay with us. We're going to share the date for next year's summit in there. So we've chosen that already, slightly earlier in the year, not so close to Halloween, but we'll share that shortly. Janet, a couple of closing comments, just a sentence or two from each of you.
For me, it's just that one thing that the summit always does for me is it gives me so much excitement and hope going into the next year, because no matter how crazy things have been, when I get with the folks who are thinking about these things deeply and knowing that we have researchers who are adding the data to it, in the space that I do my work, diversity, equity, inclusion, so much of that people just run on vibes. And that's why we always run into trouble. So when I hear people who are really thoughtful about these things, and knowing that I work for an organization that is very serious about putting data behind some of that thought, it gives me a lot of hope that no matter what we're looking at, it's always up and down in this space, that there are people and there are ways to actually do this work in a way that's sustainable, that allows us to be adaptable and allows us to be accountable. So I'm feeling good about 2025.
Fantastic. Thanks so much, Janet. Appreciate you. Dean, and then Rachel.
I've been thinking about this concept of uncertainty a lot, and I speak a lot about this, and because what I believe is we're not in a unique moment. What I believe is that this will continue. So we're not like in this weird, like incredibly uncertain moment where the world feels like it's crazy. Climate change is going to continue. It's going to get more volatile. We're going to have entire states that cannot operate because of climate issues, or countries completely flooded. We're going to have continuous social political issues. All these challenges that we're having to deal with and trying to get work done at the same time are going to do it. In the places that look at this as opportunity and thrive in sustainability are going to survive. And because it's not going to kind of like, let's wait out the storm. There's another one coming. And so I know that sounds like gloom and doom, but it's truth. And I think understanding how to deal with it and shape it. There's a great quote I saw once recently, and it was Microsoft, who in a tumultuous technology moment said the iPhone is a ridiculous tool. People don't. It's never going to be usable. If you look at what we're doing for the PC right now, people love their PCs. I think our strategy is just fine. And so I think not recognizing disruptive moments can get you pretty far behind in a situation like, I think we're pretty okay. It's a chaotic moment, but I think we're doing just fine. Hunker down. It's not the time to hunker down. It's time to lean in.
Yeah, definitely. Definitely time to lean in. Thanks so much, Dean. Appreciate you. Rachel.
Yeah, so much of what you said, Dean, resonates with me. It's like we should all be working on our sea legs, because we're surfing, like waves of change aren't going to stop. And I love what Dr. Christine Chesborough put in from this morning's keynote. Uncertainty and curiosity are the same state appraised differently. And I think that there's so much opportunity in that. There's so much opportunity in us. We had a great session maybe years ago with a senior HR leader who came and talked to us about how she balanced her HR investments, and talked about it like an investment portfolio. I want my big bets, and I want my really risky things, and I want my safe bets as well. And a piece of advice, maybe a closing thought that I would leave you all with is, as we navigate change, as we build our sea legs, like keep feeding your curiosity. Think about your portfolio of investments with your people, with your budget, with your time, with your personal energy, and save some of that for something crazy. Save some of that for a little research. Save some of that for a new habit, or keeping yourself accountable. But make sure that even as we navigate a lot of threat, perceived differences, that we're doing something new and pushing the envelope in the right direction.
Fantastic. Fantastic. Thanks so much, Rachel. I'm going to let you go, bring Erin on. Thanks so much, Rachel, Dean, Janet, and Anna. Really appreciate you all and the long-term collaboration we have with each of you. And thanks for your insightful comments on thriving through uncertainty. Thanks so much. Take care of yourselves. Look after each other. Keep doing what matters out there. Erin, over to you to take over. We've got a few minutes to close. Stay with us, everyone. Some fun announcements from Erin.
Yes, thank you, everyone, and thank you, David. I'm going to share screen really quickly. We have some numbers and just some insights to go through. Just want to make sure everything's showing up okay.
Yes,
Okay.
5,200 watches globally. Wow.
Yeah, the final numbers we're still crunching, but this is kind of the early estimate of how many people joined over the last 2 days. I know a virtual summit can always kind of feel a little isolating. We're sitting in our own apartments or in our own offices, but you were part of something quite large with about 5,200 people watching. So thank you all for being here, number one, and thank you all for everyone who joined in as well. In terms of our insights from day two,
Your screen's not coming up somehow.
Is it not?
Yeah, do you want to try sharing again? No, some people can see it. Yeah, try now. Yeah, keep
Some
going.
people okay. In terms of our insights from day two, we had Niles sitting in every session yet again. Niles is Analyze AI assistant. It's our neuro-intelligent leadership enhancement system. And these are the big insights from today. So in terms of leadership development, effective leadership is increasingly defined by soft skills like empathy, humility, adaptability. And leaders have to embrace neurodiversity and inclusion while being mindful of generational and gender expectations in the workplace. Growth mindset, as we just mentioned in the previous session, continues to kind of be at the forefront of the summit. So growth mindset is crucial for personal and organizational success. Leaders should encourage curiosity, adaptability, and continuous learning while balancing ambition with realistic expectations to avoid burnout. We also want to make sure that we're prioritizing a human connection. So this is where SCARF comes back in. So understanding and leveraging the SCARF model can significantly improve workplace dynamics, trust, and psychological safety. By addressing social needs and reducing perceived threats, leaders can foster more positive and productive work environments. In the realm of DE&I and bias mitigation, it's important to ground these initiatives in a growth mindset, emphasizing vulnerability, learning, and accountability. When we understand biases and work to implement strategies like the SEEDS model, we can create more inclusive and equitable workplaces. And finally, helping leaders develop for an evolving workplace. Sorry, it's late in the day. My words are going with me. But as the workplace evolves, leaders must adapt to hybrid work models, leverage different technology, and prioritize well-being. By integrating neuroscience-based approaches, organizations can enhance leadership development and foster a culture of innovation and resilience. David, anything you'd say to those insights?
I mean, it's just amazing, as I was saying yesterday, that Niles, can do something we can't do, which is have no FOMO. Niles can be everywhere all at once and actually pull insights out across the board. I think I often call Niles a he accidentally, but it's really an it probably. But Niles is I think I think really captured it. Those are the critical insights, and I think it's I think it's really nailed it.
Excellent. I think we'll do something to package up all the Niles insights we have for the summit and make sure attendees get those just like in a handy kind of takeaway. But for now, we're going to move on to your insights as participants. When we think back on the purpose of the summit, sharing big ideas, demonstrating impact, and sparking momentum, I want to take some time to make sure we're reflecting on the insights that you have. And we always encourage you to share the insights you have on social media. You can use the hashtag 2024 NLS. But I'm going to bring the Eureka scale back up. And as I do this, I'm going to take maybe 2 minutes of just quiet on the line so you can reflect on the last couple days and identify what was the biggest insight that you had, what was that level 5 insight, and ask you to share it in the chat if you would be willing to do so, just so we can kind of see what was relevant for everyone who was in attendance. So I'll give you about a couple minutes to reflect.
Yeah, let's get all your comments in the chat.
And just to quickly address, yes, everyone who's in attendance will have access to the recordings as well.
It's for how long? It's for is it a certain period of time?
I'm not sure, but 180
180
days.
days.
Evan just put it in the chat. Perfect. We're starting to see some insights come in with the number. Thank you, Cynthia, for being, or Cynthia for being first there.
civility is contagious. Make sure you put the message to everyone rather than hosts and panelists when you plug it in.
Oh yeah, we want to make sure everyone can see.
And there are SHRM credits. There you go.
All right, I just saw our first 5. Excellent, from Jennifer around certainty.
Well, thanks for the nice comments from Michelle. She says she's attended about every summit virtually, and this has been the best ever, more than 3 times the number of insights from previous. That's wonderful to hear. It's a crazy idea running a summit in 3 time zones. Just amazing. And 5,200 people logging in is about 6 times more than we used to have when it was in person. So amazing.
Excellent. Well, thank you so much for sharing your insights. I will allow you to keep doing so. Don't feel like we're moving you on too quickly, but I do want to unveil what we've all been waiting for, which are the dates for next year's summit. So you'll see it here on the screen, October 1st and 2nd, 2025. David, any idea if we're doing it virtual again, hybrid?
It's so hard to say, see sort of how the world is. I know we're going to have a strong virtual summit for sure. So October 1 and 2 will be a strong virtual summit. Now, will we do something in person or some sites? We may do. Too early to say. If it is, it'll be New York. It'll be New York City. But at the moment, I would plan on a virtual summit, hold the dates for next year. And, we're getting better and better at the virtual summits as well. I think it's a really amazing format with some limitations but some strengths, and as you have a growth mindset about it, you leverage the strengths. You could have 5,200 people really connecting, and look at that, our team's already put in the link for that. So if you're super keen to hold the dates and get registered, you can do that as well.
Yeah, speaking personally, seeing the evolution of platforms since 2020 has been fantastic. And then just finally, we want to do a huge thank you to both our speakers and the NLI team. It's hard to kind of see it all at once because we're not in a big room, but we had 31 sessions in 48 hours across the globe. We had 80 speakers representing 40 different organizations, and we had 90 members of the NLI team helping out both on screen and behind it. And we just want to give a huge shout out to everyone who was involved.
Just a huge shout out. Emma, would you come on screen? You weren't briefed to do this, but just come on screen for a minute if you can. Emma really put the whole summit together, leads our research team, just did a really magnificent job, incredible job, and stayed cool under pressure, like 99.9% of the time, amazingly. I don't know how she quite did it, but incredible job, Emma. Can you come on screen for a moment? Just want to give you a big acknowledgement. I hope you're eating and drinking and all the things right about now. But amazing work, really one of our best summits yet. And just your ability to integrate, pull together is amazing.
Bring Evan on. He's there too.
Evan.
Turn on
and Evan as well. I was coming to him next. And Evan, a huge thank you for your amazing work on the technology and the marketing and the programming and all the other stuff that isn't about core research. Evan, if you can come on screen for a moment as well. Sorry, we didn't brief either of you on that. There we are, both in your pajamas.
Ready for hair mess at this moment.
So good to see you all. Thank you all.
Pleasure.
Thank you, Evan. Thanks so much for everything. So just big thanks. Also amazing work, Erin, on the MC. It was wonderful after 19 summits to finally not have anything to do with the MC and let go and see you do an amazing job. So really incredible work.
Thank you. You've known it's been my dream for a while, so I was happy to step in.
So thanks very much to the team, to everyone involved. And there's a huge amount of work. It's a huge push. It's been some amazing insights and impact had out there. Thank you so much. Please take care of yourselves. Make sure you get some downtime. Everyone involved from NLI, make sure you get some downtime and get some real recovery time and refresh and energize. To everyone else out there, thank you so much for being here. Take care of yourselves. Look after each other. Keep doing what matters out there. And reach out to us. Have a conversation about anything that you've heard in this last couple of days.